Hello, beloved staff of the Kent Northwest Kidney Center. This is Andy Brokenborough, and it's time for the January 2021 monthly in-service. This talk is analogous to the film The Empire Strikes Back in the Star Wars trilogy. In response to the COVID vaccine, the evil COVID empire is fighting back with its natural weapon, genetic mutation. The original Wuhan virus is gone. It's been replaced by many subsequent generations of the virus. New lineages have arisen in parts all over the world, and there are now thousands of unique SARS-CoV-2 genomes, each the result of mutations in its genetic code. The genome of the SARS-CoV-2 virus consists of almost 30,000 RNA base pairs. Mutations in SARS-CoV-2 virus are common. There are over 4,000 mutations detected in the spike glycoprotein alone. And thanks to genetic sequencing technology, we can watch this evolution in real time. We can see the changes in the virus's genes before we even know what they mean for the spread of the disease. So today we'll discuss the mutations that may enhance the spread or pathogenicity of the virus. Why study mutations? Well, because the details could be important for controlling the pandemic. It might also preempt the more worrying mutations, those that could help the virus evade immune systems, vaccines, or antibody therapies. Currently, the CDC is sequencing about 3,000 strains per week, but it aims to increase that to about 6,500 soon. And to date, more than 90,000 isolates have been sequenced and made public. All right, so let's talk about mutations. What is a mutation? A mutation is a mistake or a change in an organism's genetic material, either DNA or RNA, and it occurs when a gene is damaged or changed in such a way as to alter the genetic message carried by that gene. Mutations range in size. They can affect anywhere from a single DNA building block base pair to a large segment of a chromosome that includes multiple genes. Some mutations may weaken a virus, while others may make it more pathogenic, or more contagious, or more prone to cause illness. Most mutations happen when a mistake is made in viral replication. That is, when a cell divides and copies its genetic material, a mistake is made in copying the DNA or the RNA. Other mutations can occur because of damage, say caused by radiation or chemicals. Okay. So viruses that encode their genome in RNA, such as the SARS-CoV-2 virus or HIV or influenza, they tend to pick up mutations quickly as they are copied inside their host, because enzymes that copy RNA are prone to making errors. But with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, interestingly, sequencing data suggests that coronaviruses change more slowly than other RNA viruses, probably because coronaviruses have the genetic programming for a proofreading enzyme that corrects copying mistakes. The typical SARS-CoV-2 virus accumulates only 2 single-letter mutations per month in its genome, which is half the rate of influenza and a quarter the rate of HIV. Many mutations will have no consequences for the virus's ability to spread or cause disease, because they don't necessarily alter the shape of a protein, whereas other mutations that do change proteins are much more likely to either harm the virus or make it more deadly. Okay, the original virus that was in Wuhan, it's now designated WIV04-2019, or refers to the RNA sequence of the original strain in Wuhan, China. It's known as sequence 0. And while there are many thousands of variants of SARS-CoV-2 now, there are much larger groupings of these variants called clades. And basically, all sorts of different nomenclature have been proposed. For example, there's this company in Germany called GSAID, which basically shares genomic information regarding influenza and COVID-19. They propose 7 clades designated either O or S or L or V or G, GH or GR. NextStrain is another organization that shares genomic data publicly, and they have 5 clades, 19A, B, or 20A, B, or C. Another researcher proposed a different clade schematic, and another one proposed 5 major lineages designated A, B, and then B11 or B1177. The only reason I mentioned these is that you may hear some of these nomenclature designations regarding new variants that have risen. Okay, so today we'll talk about several mutations that have the potential to affect the pathogenicity of SARS-CoV-2. All of these mutations affect the spike protein, which is a major target for the neutralizing antibodies that bind and render it non-infectious. Okay, first mutation we'll talk about is called the D614 mutation. This is the most common mutation of SARS-CoV-2. It encodes for a glargine amino acid rather than an aspartic acid at position 614 in the RNA genome, and this affects the spike protein. Glargine and aspartic acid are very different. Glargine is basically a non-polar amino acid, whereas aspartic acid is a polar amino acid. Really changes the nature of the protein in the spike protein. Okay, now the spike protein is comprised of 3 identical peptides, and these peptides are either in an open or a closed orientation, and at least 2 of the 3 peptides need to be open for the viral particle to fuse with the cell membrane of whatever cell it's infecting. So viruses carrying the G spike variant are much more likely to be in the open state. So basically this is a mutation that loosens the spike protein, increases the ability of the virus to enter the host cell. Okay, and the clinical result is that this increases the transmission rate, basically up to 10-fold. So this one mutation can make it 10 times more likely that this COVID virus can spread. The D614G mutation was suspected to have risen actually in China. In January of 2020, it was first detected in China and Germany. March of 2020 is known to be increasing at an alarming rate. And finally, by July of 2020, it became the dominant form in the pandemic. Essentially, not only is it more transmissible, but one study reported that this mutation is more virulent, basically, so it's more likely to cause serious disease. It's also the strain that's more likely to affect smell than other strains, probably because it has greater affinity for the ACE receptor and greater infectivity of the olfactory epithelium, basically the cell lining of the nose. Okay, so the next variant we'll talk about is the South African SARS-CoV-2 variant. South Africa, beautiful country. It's geographically diverse. It's got everything. It's got deserts and wetlands and grasslands and bush and subtropical forests and mountains and escarpment. It's also extremely rich in mining materials. It has nearly 90% of all the platinum on Earth and about 41% of all the world's gold. Happens to have the oldest meteor crater in the world, has the highest commercial bungee jump in the world at 710 feet, and it's the birthplace of the South African SARS-CoV-2 virus. It goes by different names, not that important, but you can see how the COVID clade nomenclature can be a little bit confusing. You may hear of some of these in the press, like the E484K mutation. Okay, so it's first detected on December 18th in South Africa and reported by the country's health department. It has rapidly become the dominant strain in the country's coastal areas. And in January 2021, so this month, basically, there's been a resurgence of virus in South Africa with more new cases and deaths rising rapidly, surpassing what the country experienced in its first surge in late July. Okay, the South African variant has 3 different mutations. Again, all affect the spike protein, specifically the receptor binding domain of the spike protein, the part that binds to the ACE enzyme on the cell surface of the host cell. The names are not important, but basically, again, they're all single substitution amino acid changes. And the combination of these 3 mutations increases the infectivity and the morbidity of the virus. The prevalence of the variant has increased because it's probably more infectious, and there has been international spread. All 3 of these cases have, all of these cases have been associated with travel from South Africa. The South African virus has not yet been detected in the United States. So this particular variant appears to cause more cases among young people and also more serious illness in those cases. There's emerging evidence from a handful of recent studies that suggests that the E484K might enable the South African coronavirus variant to reduce the ability of some antibodies to neutralize the virus. Suffice to say that Pfizer is doing tests now, and one of the preliminary tests that shows, at least in response to one of the mutants, the N501Y, the vaccine still appears to be effective, but these studies are ongoing. Okay, the third mutant we're going to talk about is the UK variant. It goes by different names. There are scientific names like lineage B1117, B117, or VUI 202012. CDC calls it the 20B501Y V1. But the colloquial terms that you hear in the nest are the British virus or maybe the Kent variant. Okay, this involves a mutation at the 501 site, which converts basically tyrosine into asparagine. And it changes the spike receptor binding domain, which is again needed to bind the ACE on human cells. It was first detected in December of 2020 in Kent. Okay, Kent in the UK, not Kent, Washington. The clinical clue was that there were cases rising in Kent despite the national restrictions. And then they did backward tracing, basically, and found that the variant likely first emerged in September 2020, circulated at low levels in the population until mid-November when it exploded. Thus far, it's been found in 45 countries, so the cat is definitely out of the bag on this one. Just over a little week ago, Australia locked down Brisbane, a city of 2.3 million people, after discovering a single case there. So this mutation renders it substantially more transmissible than other variants, about 74% more transmissible. And, a surge in it basically has resulted in a surge of SARS-CoV-2 cases around the start of the new year, all related to this variant. So basically, it's the dominant variant in London now. It's poised to become the dominant strain in Ireland. It's currently only 0.1% of variants in the U.S., but it's expected to become the dominant variant by March of 2021, so just a couple months from now. And basically, our ability to control this virus looks very tenuous. Okay, so the next strain we'll talk about is the mink mutant, or the mink variant, also known as the cluster 5 variant. And this occurred in the wonderful country of Denmark. So Denmark, fun facts, oldest flag in the world that's still in use today for 800 years. They have the 2 oldest amusement parks in the world. They're famous for their Danishes, although actually Danishes were imported from Vienna, Austria. Basically, there was a group of immigrants from Vienna, Austria that immigrated to Denmark in the mid-1800s, and they brought Danishes with them. So we call them Danishes, but they're actually from Austria. Interestingly, Denmark is the largest producer of mink fur in the world. It's also the home of the mink coronavirus mutant, also called the cluster 5 variant. Okay, so cluster 5 is this variant discovered in northern Jutland in Denmark among the mink population. There are 5 different mutations. The details are not important, but again, these are 5 mutations all within the spike protein. So they change the spike protein a lot. And the more mutations you accumulate in the spike protein, the more the configuration change, the harder it is for an antibody to identify and recognize that spike protein. So basically, increased risk of reducing the sensitivity to neutralizing antibodies. Believed to spread from minks to humans via the mink farms. In fact, on November 5th, there were 12 cases of human infection with the cluster 5 variant that were detected in northern Jutland, Denmark. So this really freaked people out. And again, there is a risk. The more mutations you accumulate in spike protein, the less our vaccine is going to be effective. It's certainly currently thought that it would still be effective, but it would potentially render them useless or decrease their effectiveness. Okay, so in response to this outbreak, the Danish government announced a decision to slaughter the entire mink population of 14 million in Denmark, and basically have locked down northern Jutland to prevent the mutation from spreading. Mink farming, incidentally, will be banned in Denmark starting in 2024. Okay, now a few weeks later, so basically they slaughtered the 14 million and they buried all the mink in these troughs, buried them about 2 feet deep. They were supposed to be buried apparently about 3 feet deep, so they didn't bury them quite enough. And what happened was, as the bodies decompose, basically they produce gas, and that causes the mink bodies to expand and basically push them upwards and out of the ground. So basically, social media went crazy. All sorts of posts, including "The Year of the Zombie Mutant Killer Mink" or "Run, the mink are coming for you." All right. Next variant we're talking about is the Malaysia mutant. Okay, so Malaysia, a small country located on a trade route in the South China Sea. It's the birthplace of shoe designer Jimmy Choo. Interestingly, Malaysia has a rotating monarchy system. So there are 9 ethnic Malay state rulers, and they take turns ruling as king for 5-year terms. It's probably a good compromise, but I'd hate to be like the 9th in line. I mean, who'd want to wait for 45 years to take your turn being king? Malaysia is also the site of origin of the A701B mutant coronavirus. Okay, so this was discovered not that long ago, basically on December 23rd, 2020. Is identified in the clusters of cases in Sabah. Sabah, by the way, is a municipality, Malaysian state located in the northern province of Borneo. So it's not far from the Philippines. And this mutant is thought to be similar to the one found in South Africa, Australia, and the Netherlands, although it's uncertain if it's more infectious or virulent than other strains. In response to this, the Philippines temporarily suspended travel from the Sabah in response. And basically, the clinical impact of the mutation is unknown, but it worries people. It's another spike protein mutant. Okay, many of you have probably heard about the mushroom variant. This is perhaps the scariest mutation of all that's gone on. So COVID-19 is also mutated, allowing for them to infect the Pacific Northwest mushrooms. This mushroom contains an estimated 3 trillion COVID-19 viruses and will eventually swell and explode, and releases the virions into the air with the potential to spread to other organisms and maybe even other plants. Infected mushrooms have even adopted the shape and characteristic spike protein seen on the SARS-CoV-2 virus surfaces. So pretty scary, huh? Okay, actually, I just made all this up. This is a mushroom that I found in my backyard that looks like the COVID-19 virus, so I took a picture. So no, COVID-19 does not infect mushrooms. Okay, so in summary, COVID-19 mutations occur when an error in copying its RNA during replication changes its genetic sequence, thus altering the configuration of the protein, most often affecting the spike protein. Mutations in SARS-CoV-2 virus are common. There are several new mutations which alter the spike protein and appear to make the virus more contagious. The big concern is, of course, that they will also render the virus less susceptible to antibodies. The vaccine is still expected to work against these new variants, but it could change to the point that the antibody did not recognize the spike protein. Okay, so now it's time for your favorite part of the in-service, which is the quiz time. So, question 1. How do mutations occur? Okay, mistakes in copying genetic material or damage to genetic material by radiation or chemicals. Next question, true or false? A South African variant of COVID-19 virus has been reported in the United States. So thank goodness it has not been reported. It's been reported in several other countries, and again, all of those cases resulted because of travel from South Africa. But so far, no cases yet in the United States. Okay, next question. True or false? The UK variant was first reported in Kent. That is Kent, UK, not Kent, Washington. And the answer is true. Okay, next question. What do all of the COVID-19 mutations discussed today have in common? That's right. They all affect the spike protein. So those are the ones that are likely to be clinically significant because the spike protein is integral in its ability to infect the host. All right, next question. True or false? The D614 mutation increases the transmissibility of the virus by up to 10-fold. And the answer is true. Okay. Oh, I gave you the answer. True or false? COVID-19 can infect mushrooms. And the answer is, of course, false. Okay, so this concludes the January 2021 in-service for the Kent Northwest Kidney Center unit. Thank you for all you do. Don't forget to get your vaccine and stay safe. This is Andy Brokenbrough, your medical director, signing out.